I think, will Jonathan be our first return guest?
Oh my
We keep
God.
talking about having return guests, but like we're actually doing it. And
I
Jonathan, you're
know.
our first one.
Yes.
I'm
And
I'm suitably honored.
well, as you should be, as you should be.
Well, you have you know what, we should have a rule if our guests end up publishing a book after we talk with them, then we have them on because we have to talk about your book. That's on my agenda.
Okay, I didn't know that was a rule, Julia, but
Oh, I
that
made it up. That's why you
I
didn't
know. Of course you did.
seconds ago.
Somebody's got to make up the rules.
Exactly. A person will make up the rules. Might as well be me.
I'm just going to hold the cup here so to let someone take a screenshot and then try to use it against me. You
Still
see?
watching you.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead, take the shot now.
Oh, someone should take a screenshot of my beautiful painting made by my friend from high school, Jim McHale.
It is beautiful, but we can't see it very clearly. I tell you what I can see. I can see a person.
It's a woman, and she's like a
Uh-huh.
naked woman. This is actually his future wife, that he painted. Um, and she is looking up with awe at this energy that's like in the universe and coming out of her.
Ah, okay. Very nice.
It's really cool.
I'm
Very
not going to say
nice.
Schopenhauer.
Yeah,
So
no Schopenhauer. This is our no Schopenhauer show.
have we started?
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
well, I'm recording. And then, the editor will do what little
Okay.
magic the
Um,
editor is capable of doing.
all right. I don't know if Carmen wants me not to mention seeing her at the Spy Museum
No, you can. You may.
with my daughters-in-laws who were quite impressed. Uh,
Well, as I said, that's been up there for 6 or 7 years, and I fully expect them to get rid of me. But on the other hand,
hmm.
I bet they had footage of people who are now in bad odor. Is that the phrase? Bad odor with this administration? That
Bad
they're pro
wonder. That's a great
is
phrase.
that am I remembering
Oh
that
no, that's
phrase?
a good Britishism. Yeah.
Yeah, who are
Oh,
in bad odor with this
Uh,
administration. And I bet, well, they
there's
may have decided to not no longer use those clips because of that, because the person is controversial. And so far, I seem to be
well,
flying under the controversy.
yeah. Well, I was saying to Carmen, the most interesting thing to me about museums in general, this one in particular, is how they carefully frame the story. Um,
Well, I've only been there once on kind of its big opening gala. I got a ticket because of my contributions, and I got to walk around it, and I, I was not interested in looking at every exhibit in great detail, although I did, stop at some that were interesting.
yeah.
My only conclusion was that it was many, many levels better than the first one.
Yeah, far better than the first one, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
What did you like about it? Or, well, what did you like about it, and what struck you about how they framed the intelligence community?
yeah.
Well, as necessary and in some cases heroic. Um, the nastiest stuff, of course, didn't get in, right? I mean, it's a kids museum too. Uh,
Right. There's nothing about MK Ultra in there. There's
yeah,
nothing.
there's a lot that obviously isn't there.
Yeah.
They're making some money though because there are no other museums open unless you want to go to the Phillips.
Well, you know what is also open is it's almost in your neighborhood, the Hillwood House.
Yeah. Those things are open, but not much. And our actually the our in-laws really, or Stephen especially, really wanted to see the Spy Museum. So I think even if everything else was open, they wanted to see the Spy Museum.
Well,
Yeah,
what did the
yeah.
kids like and what did you like? Did you like anything in
It was
particular?
just us and the in-laws,
Oh, okay.
our daughter's in-laws. Um, I thought Israel, the Shin Bet guy, they have a film that's pretty provocative. Um, I was all interested in how people were looking at stuff, who was there and how they were, how middle
Yeah, so
America was.
what did people gravitate toward?
Oh, it was so crowded that
Oh,
you
so they
couldn't say
gravitated to
one
everything.
thing.
Yeah,
No, right.
yeah.
It's really crowded.
Did
Um,
you do the Obama team figure out where bin Laden is exhibit?
well, actually, I think I walked past that one. I thought
Yeah,
the
with
Kennedy,
a lot of people, you probably couldn't get in there.
yeah, I wasn't knocking myself out to see everything, I gotta say. I thought the missile crisis was not as good as it could have been. They left out some interesting, I think, important stuff.
And I'll just say because we do I believe we do have people who watch our videos who are under the age of 60. By missile crisis, you are referring to the Cuban missile
Yes, but I didn't
crisis.
think we're starting yet, so that's right.
Yes. No, no, we
Oh yeah,
are. We are. This is it. I bet you
this
this
is
will make
Father.
it.
This is
Yes.
how podcasts go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I should also say that I have an hour,
Good, good. Well,
Yes,
not good,
we,
but
but
good to know.
we don't
Yes.
need to have the whole hour if you
Uh-huh.
well, so
say anything worth listening to.
I'm desperate to talk to you about something in your book that I ended up giving. Is it okay if we dive into your book?
Ooh,
I sorry I have not read it, but
No, and I barely read it. Like I was able to get through it, but it's a very scholarly book for people in the field. And
why don't you describe it
yeah,
or let someone describe
it's an
it?
academic book for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's called Absolutely Essential, right? I believe that's the title. I would hold it up, except I gave it to my neighbor for whom the book is actually absolutely
I think
essential.
it is behind me somewhere, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yes, yes, I see it. Um, but it's about bio warfare, essentially,
Mm.
bioethics, and more importantly about bioethics. And absolutely essential is taken from this big ethics document that
The
I forget
Nuremberg
the name of.
Code that
The Nuremberg Code,
was written
yes.
by the judges at a trial of Nazi doctors in 1947. Um, and the argument of the book, in brief, this is the elevator pitch, is that this little field of bioethics or medical ethics, biomedical ethics, in the modern world is a product of the rules-based order that has prevailed for the last 80 years and is now certainly at least diminished, if not collapsed. And that is also an exemplar of the rules-based order.
Mm.
Um, that is to say, some of the values implicit in the last 80 years, the idea that there should be rules and that the old imperial system of might makes right and strong men, and I use men advisedly in this case as descriptive, that was a very unstable system. There was a chance to fix it after World War One. For many reasons, that didn't work out.
Is
After
that
World War
are you referring to Kellogg
Kellogg
Briand?
Briand and of course the League of Nations,
Right.
which President Wilson, for all his faults, I think deserves credit for
League of Nations.
having some vision in that case. But he was never able, he became ill and he was never able to persuade Congress to ratify the League, so the US was not part of the League. But by the end of World War II, it was so obvious that the old imperial system was unstable, depending on strongmen leaders and on bilateral relationships, not multilateral relationships, and conventions that in many cases were not implemented or were not written. By the end of the war, people said, well, we really need to try to fix this. Um, so there were a lot of things that happened. The most obvious is the UN
Mm-hmm.
and the various subsidiary organizations of the UN, one of which I was quite involved with, UNESCO, um,
All
but
right.
many other organizations. Uh, and these organizations intending to set global rules of conduct in their domains. And bioethics is one of them. So the most obvious example of this is the rules for doing human experiments, which are quite well established now and quite universal. So
Universal even in China?
Yes, and I actually devote a part of a chapter of the book to this question.
Mm,
Have the Chinese gone their own way? Now, you could always say, well, as far as I know, and I'll come back to that qualifier, Carmen, if you remind me in a sec. Um, there are two things that are required in every jurisdiction in the world if you're going to ask somebody to be in a human experiment, that is to say, a drug trial or a device trial. And I'm sure you both know this. One is the prior review by a committee that is not conflicted to see if the protocol is acceptable, and we can talk more about how they could be acceptable. And the other thing is in what we call informed consent. And the notion that everybody everywhere, no matter who you are, where you are, how much money you have, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, that everybody has the right to these elements before you are put into a human experiment. That in turn relies on a notion of universal human equality, which is not written in stone and is very much a product of the rules-based order, a basic value of the rules-based order. So if the rules-based order is diminished, it's a perfectly reasonable question to say, well, what else goes with it? Now, and I'll stop talking in a second. So far, everybody's playing by the rules. Yes, Carmen, even China, so far as we know. And the example is the manipulation of the genomes of those embryos of
yes,
17, which the China PRC, I'm just saying specifically, the PRC scientific community got up and said, no, this is not acceptable.
that's
Yeah, they
right.
condemned it. Yeah.
And as you know, the three investigators were imprisoned, which I'm not
Hmm.
even sure we could do if that had been done in the US, unless they defrauded the NIH.
Right.
So, um, so far, it looks as though that system is pretty reliable. It depends on a voluntary idea, right? That first of all, that if you're a funding agency, you won't approve a project that doesn't offer those elements. It won't pay for it, and that editors, journal editors, will not publish your results, and scientists really like to publish their results. So at the moment, I think that looks pretty stable. And I'm going to stop just with this sentence. Tomorrow, as it happens, I'm giving a keynote at Georgetown on a conference on AI and national security, a topic that's close to both of your hearts. Um, and I'm going to say that for emerging technologies like AI, that is not so clear.
Yes.
Right. That's
So
right.
3 weeks ago, was it the UN said we're going to have a special committee and we're going to do an outreach about AI and establish some standards, and immediately the administration said no, we don't really care what you say about AI. So that's a problem.
Well, I I'm inclined to think that AI, the rollout of AI already kind of broke the rules. If you put AI in the same category as biochemical weapons in the sense that it can have a huge impact
Yeah,
and that it plays around with the human psychology and the mind. And it was released for use by the general population with what appears to me to have been minimal consideration about what could happen next. And we
yes.
know that bad things have happened next.
If you're thinking specifically about the first version of Chatty 3.0,
Yeah,
ChatGPT,
Every chat
everyone.
engine. Yeah.
I
You
would say
know,
it's even more fundamental in this sense. The very business model of, for example, Facebook, is based on experimenting.
Yeah.
exactly.
So I really think that AI is late to the game, and it's before even social media, which has been experimenting on children without permission for decades. Like, don't get me started. But anyway, um, even before that, because the only sort of roadblocks we've had, at least in the US, are, as you said, journal editors and funders who don't, like private funders don't always play by that rule anyway.
Yeah.
But those are the roadblocks we have to not doing something that doesn't have an institutional review board. Those roadblocks don't apply to any industry that doesn't care if they don't even want to publish their results because they want to keep the data as proprietary. They don't need to have a funder. And
Right.
they also don't apply to government agencies who do their own experiments on their own people to try to figure out how to get the best performance out of the people.
Oh, well, I'm going to correct you there. I think it applies to government agencies in the same way that it applies to journals.
What I'm
Well,
saying is,
government agencies choose, and any government agency I worked with had the same kind of panel and the same kind of process
I think the problem we're
to,
having here is the word experiment. So
yes,
the
yeah,
Julie is using the word experiment in a very broad sense.
yeah.
yes,
I'm using the word experiment in a very specific sense, right? Which
right.
is a randomized clinical trial or a device study. Now, of course, capitalism is always experimenting. Capitalism is inherently experimental in the sense that, I mean, you watch an old ad on YouTube, right, from the 60s, which I love to do, and they're putting stuff out, and those ads have changed as the society has changed.
Right.
They know if they work or not because they sell more or they don't. So there's a broad sense in which capitalism is very experimental and requires that, right, for branding purposes.
Well, but I would like to be clear that, I mean, we know that some agencies haven't, like in the military, didn't get an institutional review board for actual experiments they were doing on their soldiers until recently. So like,
This is
So
true. Some agencies have been slow to adopt these processes. That is true.
yeah.
Yes, that is true. It's certainly true. The intelligence community has been a bit slow. But interestingly, the Defense Department, as you may know from my previous writings, which I'm sure you committed to memory, in 1953 adopted the Nuremberg Code, which we started our conversation by talking about, as its policy for doing what they called preventive measures of defense studies for atomic, biological, and chemical warfare experiments. So the DoD had a policy in 53 that tracked the Nuremberg Code. In fact, it was verbatim, the Nuremberg Code. Did they pay attention to it all the time? Did it get through the system? I think we can say probably not. Um, and it's been, but one has to say that those federal agencies that we're talking about, security agencies, the intelligence community, they weren't much worse than, in fact, they were in some respects better than medicine in general,
Hmm.
uh,
Oh, yeah.
medical science in general, right? So, and or the social sciences in general, as Julie knows so well. So, um, nobody was great at this. My friend who's been gone for 12, 13, 14 years, I lose track, Jay Katz, who was a physician, psychiatrist at Yale and taught family law and bioethics in the law school at Yale. Left Germany in 1936 as a kid, was in Harvard Medical School in the late 40s. And I said, Jay, when the Nuremberg Code was reported, which it was in the New York Times, and the Nazi doctors' trial, what did the professors at Harvard Medical School say? And they said that's a really good code of ethics for barbarians.
Mm.
We're not Nazis.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessary for proper, standard, routine medical science. So it took a long time for this to catch up. It's a long story. We can delve into the 60s and the scandals of the 60s and of course the syphilis study. Um, Nonetheless, even though red lines have been breached, the cool thing about the last 80 years, there have been red lines. I mean,
Oh, totally agree. Right. It could be much worse. It could
better than
be
nothing.
no red lines.
Right.
And what do you lose? I mean, so just to paint this picture, one of the things you talk about in the book, there's two things that I want to ask you about that you talk about in the book. One is the invisible college, and one is sort of you trace out the argument for like what happens if we don't have these red lines? What do we lose? And I think that's important to talk about, you know, not just guess at, but just talk about with our mouths if you're open to that.
Sure. What do we lose? Well, I mean, I guess you could say that not having rules around the various forms of artificial intelligence could create great hazards. Um, I'm thinking at the moment just about the way that a DoD regulation 3000.09 refers in the broadest possible way to the use of autonomous decision making in weapon systems. That is a very important matter. Um, just a couple of days ago, President Putin announced these nuclear-powered missiles that could apparently linger in the stratosphere. I think it's the stratosphere, but I'll be happy to be corrected for quite a while. I know you didn't ask me about this, but it's on my mind. You may
Oh,
know
very
that
interesting. I wonder if you got that from China.
though he claims that this is an original system.
Hmm.
Um, and look, they have good engineers, so it's entirely possible, and they know something about nukes. Um, the U.S. toyed with the notion, more than toyed, actually, was very interested in the notion of a nuclear-powered aircraft after World War II. It was a project, a nuclear energy-powered aircraft, NEPA, and there's stuff that's publicly accessible about it. And they decided that among other things, it would not be a good idea because if that thing hit the ground, you you know it, you right, you could have Chernobyl.
Right.
So I'm not. I'm wondering how much they thought about that. Our friends over there, and what kind of measures are taken to ensure that that does not happen if one of those things falls out of the ground accidentally, falls out of the air accidentally. So yeah. So I'm sorry. Back to my previous several paragraphs. Yeah. What do we lose if we don't have some sense of what the rules of the game are for AI targeting and execution of weapon systems? And as you know, this conversation has gone on for decades, and it got hotter, I think, under Secretary Hagel in the early 2010s. There was talk in the DoD about the third offset, which was autonomous weapons that are more or less autonomous. So, in the new regime in the DoD, what's that conversation like right now? I'd love to know. But the tempo of modern warfare is not getting slower. So the impetus to grant more and more, I'll just use the word autonomy to weapon systems is not on the decrease.
It doesn't seem to me that the current Secretary of Defense, that these are issues which appeal to the current Secretary of Defense. He seems much more interested in sort of the psychology of the warrior
Hmm.
and that kind of thing, and not, the fact that a 90-pound weakling could autonomously or by running a remote type of weapon cause way more damage than his beardless, very buff
Yeah,
warrior.
you know what? When I published my book Mind Wars 20 years ago, the talk about neuroscience and national security in the military was mostly about super soldiers. In fact,
Mhm.
Mm.
uh, making people more buff by giving them prosthetic arms and legs and and those were kind of cartoonish images, right? And then somehow 10 years ago, people realized, no, the real game here is
Yes.
smart individuals who can function in a cyber environment. And,
And,
and
the Air Force has been fighting, uh, I I believe this is still the case, this kind of almost desperate action to preserve the role of humans
yeah,
in aviation. And, a lot of people like the airlines really interested in this outcome because
yeah,
it affects their ability to hire people.
right. Uh, when I gave a talk in the UK, not long after the Mind Wars came out, um, it was at one of the war colleges and about an hour or 2 hours from Heathrow. And there are a lot of Air Force personnel, mid-level officers from around the world, the old empire, basically. And all they wanted to talk about was Clint Eastwood's plane,
Mm,
Firefox. They thought that was really cool. But as you say, there's still a person deciding when Firefox should fire.
right, right.
Um, So yeah, it is true, as you say. I don't know if this Secretary of Defense is thinking about these matters in the way that they need to be thought about in the 2020s, as against, 25, 30 years ago. Um, but there is a little bit of good news that I noticed the other day. Maybe you know more about this than I do, that the Office of Net Assessment has been
Oh, I
reestablished,
hadn't
No
heard that.
kidding.
but
That's a big
but
deal.
not reporting directly to the Secretary, which frankly is fine. So yeah, so
Well, it
that
should be independent. It's trying to do independent things.
yeah, and there's a place where if it has the ears of the right people, could make a difference, and in these kinds of discussions.
Well, in terms
Well,
of the Secretary of Defense being concerned about the individual, like the individual humans, I mean, it seems to me that, well, I don't know, this is an obvious point, but like if someone could make the point to him that the way to get those humans to be buff in mind and body is to help them learn how to have responsible AI partnerships.
Hmm.
That's really a powerful approach to those things that could maybe make a difference. I think there's hope. I don't know. I always think there's hope.
Well, somebody has to. I think that's your role, and thank you for that.
My job is to hold up the hope
I can
thing.
offload that on you.
Yeah, okay.
so
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but when you were talking at the beginning about your book, I was reminded of one of the most influential books I ever read, which is called The Internationalists.
Hmm.
Are you
Yeah.
familiar with this book?
I don't
I've
think so.
mentioned it before. The Internationalists is a book about the history of laws about war and conflict.
Hmm.
So it starts in the Netherlands with Gropius, I think that's his name,
Grotius, yeah.
and sorry, say it again.
Grotius.
Grotius, yeah,
Model TIUS,
Grotius,
I mentioned
and
briefly.
goes all the way through um, the 18th and 19th centuries, and talks about the League of Nations
Yeah,
and
there's a
stuff.
Union Army Civil War era directive.
Yes,
It's
there's
actually
a yeah.
And it gives you the feeling, just like you said, that it's a good thing that there are red lines at all. Like that's an advancement.
So
And
my favorite part of the of this book is the story about the our conflict with the Native Americans and how the US military twisted itself into knots
Mhm.
uh, trying to accuse Native Americans of war crimes. And then finally someone said, wait a minute, if we accuse them of war crimes, that's turnaround is fair play. And we're like, we're no angels on this one.
Yeah.
And so forth and so on.
General Amherst smallpox blankets and so forth.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So and the conclusion of the book of the author, the point that the author is trying to prove, and I think actually it's a woman or maybe it's two co-authors, is that people say that attempts to govern war and conflict are foolhardy and stupid and haven't worked. But her argument, which I think is similar to yours,
Mhm.
is that the effort is worth it, and even if the original thing only moved the needle 1%,
Yeah.
100 years later, that 1% movement of the needle makes a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, the alternative is just not acceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
About a year ago, I was at a meeting where I met one of the participants was a woman who had spent a career, maybe 10 years or so, in the Belgian military. And she was now working, and I believe still is, for the International Committee of the Red Cross. And we had a long conversation. And she told me something quite interesting. I didn't really know what the ICRC does. The
Mm,
ICRC, as you probably know, I didn't know, does not really provide direct care.
that's correct.
They organize, they helped organize.
That's correct.
Um, and presumably they're trying to do that in Jamaica as we speak, right? But they have another function apart from disaster managing and disasters or helping locals to manage disasters, is going to every military and every non-state actor who's willing to talk to tell them what the law of armed conflict is.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. And
That
not
is.
only state parties, as they're called, but non-state actors too.
Hmm.
And they have a list of non-state actors with whom they meet.
So how does that work in terms of the rules? I mean, isn't that sort of definition? I would, hey, do we conflate? So that's a question. Do we conflate rules-based order with coming from a nation state?
Well, I think I just say in the book what I think people in IR in national relations say, which is you do have to have a notion of state sovereignty in order to get cooperation. It's like a prerequisite, logically speaking, right? In order to get states to agree on rules, that there have to be states that are sovereign and can be autonomous to make rules and to impose them on themselves, right? Um, so they're these are related. I can't have one without the
But I
other.
mean, I guess what I'm
Um,
saying is if there are states, like let's say a billionaire is sort of considered a state because that billionaire can make rules and impose that rule on their own life and on others. Does that count as I mean, I sort of feel like
no, a billionaire is not a political system. Uh, it's not even clear that they're an organic. They're not political in the sense that they're recognized by other states. I mean, there has to be some
I see. So there
bootstrapping.
has to be agreement,
Oh,
right? There has to,
what counts as a state, right?
yeah,
Now, yeah,
someone else has to think of them as a state.
yeah.
Yeah.
There is a sense of community operating here, and it's kind of bootstrapping, right? I mean, it's not written in stone anywhere who's a state and who isn't.
I
Um,
feel like that's a very hopeful response, Jonathan.
well, I don't know if it's hopeful. I think it
Oh no,
describes.
just that they're even if you're at war, what you're doing is acknowledging a community, a relationship.
Well, certainly prior to the war, in order to enter into agreements, you have to have some sense of of a network of sovereign states.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's just very hopeful.
But that isn't what happened. I mean, it's happened in the last couple of hundred years.
Yeah.
So um, I wouldn't say it's hopeful. I would say it's descriptive. Now, does it always work? Hell no, right? It definitely doesn't always work. Um, but we're back to the same theme that it sure as hell is better than nothing. And what I found so interesting from this conversation with this person at the ICRC who goes to the field. I mean, she goes to the best and the worst. I mean, she was on her way to Canada
Mm-hmm.
with Canadian military, and then the next week she was going to Haiti. Whether you consider the Haitian entity as a successful state or not now is a good question, right? But beyond that, also the non-state actors, people who we would consider members of terrorist organizations, are meeting with them. And I said, why the hell do they care? Because I have this knee-jerk, post 9/11, uh,
Right. Yeah. And
that's crazy. Yeah.
I'm interested in that too. Why do
She
they
said,
care?
A, they want to know what the rules are, and B, they might come into power someday. You know, they
That's so hopeful because it acknowledges that the change of the status quo.
but they don't
Well,
always.
it's kind
Obviously,
of hopeful, but it's also
it's eminently practical. I mean,
uh,
if
cynical, I guess is the word I would use.
cynical, but also, yeah. But it might have a good outcome. Right? There are different ways to get to, the end of the road, right? And so it could
I
be a
think
naughty
hope,
way, and there could be a
yeah,
more idealized way. I'm happy to take the naughty way if it gets some bad guys in Sudan to say, oh, we do need to worry about what the rest of the world thinks of the way we behave. So I think that's okay. I'll take what I can get.
I guess I have a really low bar for hope because that sounds hopeful to me too.
Well,
Well, I think what uh, it points to is it's never a world of absolutes.
Yeah.
It's never like absolutely bad or absolutely good. It's all just many, 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 many shades of gray. I remember, oh, almost 20 years ago now, I was having people over to my house for dinner, and all the horrible stuff about the CIA prisons and the rendition and the torture had come out. And my friends, who usually just very politely ignore the fact that I worked for the CIA, all the headlines just they couldn't help themselves, you know. So they asked me whatever, and I said whatever I could. And then one of them said, "But that's against international law." And I kind of looked at the person and I said, "And your point is?" Because one of the reasons why we have these covert organizations is that states, governments have found it useful to have methods of operational methods to get things done around the world, short of declaring a war, that might involve that definitely will involve breaking other countries' laws. That's a given,
Hmm.
but that might also skirt, if not actually break, an international law.
Hmm.
And, you know, that is why I know some of the people that were in, and this is public knowledge, some of the people that were involved in some of the renditions that occurred in Europe, where they would pick
Yeah.
up a terrorist walking around and spirit, you know, it's basically a kidnapping.
Yeah. It is a kidnapping. Yeah.
It is. And they, you know, I don't know if there's actually warrants for their arrest out there, but they don't, as what I've heard is they don't go to Europe anymore. They, you know, there's just certain parts of the world they won't go to
Oh,
anymore
Europe.
because they know that they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, we can argue whether or not governments need this, but by creating an institution like that, you are accepting that on occasion you're going to have to break other people's laws.
Hmm.
Well, and the whole point, I guess, is if there were always laws that other people set that worked for you, then you probably wouldn't be a different nation state. I mean, I,
I'm
I
sorry, I didn't follow your point. So say it again.
if if everyone's laws on the planet worked for every other country, then we probably wouldn't have different nation states. I mean, so
That's true.
sort of
People,
by
by being
definition,
sovereign, one of the things is you get to have your own laws.
right? And so, sort of by definition,
Singapore, no chewing gum.
yeah, if you want to defend your nation state, there are going to be things like that sometimes. And the key thing is to try to not break any of your own laws and to try to be good enough.
That's the key. That's very important. And intelligence
And
community
a
historically, DOD historically, lost the plot on that one.
little bit sometimes, but working on it. No one's perfect, right? But you don't want to break the international rules-based order too much, or else then you get in trouble when you're trying to deal with a treaty, right? Or your prisoners in someone else's country. So how
Well, and that, by the way, is one of the reasons why these non-state actors care about the law,
yeah,
is that their adherents, they have a vested interest in making sure that their adherents, like Hamas, are treated well and
Yeah.
eventually released.
right.
Yes.
So,
There's an assumption of reciprocity. Otherwise, you don't enter into these agreements about the treatment
Right.
of enemy prisoners. A problem with Hamas is, do you consider it a, you know,
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I realized Hamas
is
is
it a, yeah,
basically
is it a,
a state
what is it?
anyway. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what
So,
is it? Right.
yeah, something.
this actually came up in the trial of the Nazis, of the Nazi leadership, which the International Military Tribunal treated them as a criminal gang rather than a standard political
Ah,
party. So it turned out to be an important element of the argument about why they could be tried in the first place. Normally, you don't try leaders of a failed, after a war. You don't put the leaders on.
right, right.
But so they had to find that a rationale there. Um,
Interesting.
So can I get you to speak to the Invisible College? The reason I obsess over Invisible College is because when I saw that in your book, I perked up because in the world of UFO conspiracy slash trying to understand what's going on with UFOs and UAPs, there's this whole other invisible college. That the term is used to describe these folks in the field who were like Air Force, Navy, CIA folks who were very interested in UFOs and kind of met together and called
mhm.
themselves the Invisible College and tried to like pass down knowledge, but not too much
Interesting.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And it seems a different usage in your book, and I want to understand.
Well, I mean, I think they're playing off the original post, sort of Enlightenment era Invisible College, Christopher Wren and all those people.
Okay, so yeah, that's the
Yeah,
part
so
I didn't get.
which
So
then became the Royal Academy and
oh,
uh,
see that background I didn't get. So
yeah,
non-humanities major here.
right. Well,
So
even humanities majors should know some history of ideas.
I'm not a humanities major, so I
Well,
don't know.
what you mean to say is even non-humanities
Oh
majors
yeah, no,
should know
it's
something
true.
about the
I
history of
should.
ideas.
If Oberlin College had no distribution requirements, I with all science and math.
Well, right, Oberlin. So, I mean, the notion here is that after the postal service in Europe and the UK became more reliable, 18th, 19th century, people would pass textbooks and notes around with marginalia and so forth. And this was the invisible college. They didn't actually physically ever get together, right? This happened very much like today, right? So I think probably the group you're talking about is playing off this notion of invisible college of
No doubt. Yeah.
people who have an intellectual interest and other interest in these events and like to share notes uh, and share theories and so forth. So yeah, um, I was talking about the invisible college in the book in a much more formalistic way about the way that you know my neighbor who's a scientist at NIH has more in common with a scientist at Tsinghua or Fudan than with me in some important
Right,
ways, right?
right.
I mean, they can talk each other's language, the science language, and I can't. Uh, Julia could, but I couldn't. Uh,
But you could talk the philosopher's language. So yeah, it's these sort
yeah,
of verticals.
yeah, exactly. They're verticals, you might say, right? Um, and that, so actually, there's somebody named Carolyn Wagner who I haven't seen in many years, who taught me about the Indivisible College and wrote about it some years ago. When she was at Brookings, I just read a piece by her um, in which she reports on the way that China has actually superseded the U.S. in terms of knowledge production, as measured by
Hmm.
publications in
I'll have to find that.
major one-word journals, Nature, Cell, Science, and so forth, and their family and
Oh
their
yeah, that's a massive result. Came out a couple of years ago.
in those families. Sorry.
That came out a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Well, Carolyn's book came out, I mean, maybe 15, 20 years ago. I used it when I wrote
I'm
my book, The Body Politic.
I'm thinking about something else. Okay.
And I can send you the link to this piece that I just read yesterday. It's very good. So the point being that those scientists in China that have now exceeded our science productivity, objectively so, uh, which was predicted, has been predicted for 15 years. I said it was going to be
Correct.
body politic. I said, it looks like everything's going that way. And that was 15 years ago or so. Um, that is the case, and it is in our interest to keep talking with those people because we need to be in the college together. Uh,
Right,
so I don't, this whole business of deglobalization, I think, is going to work differently in different places, in different verticals, as Julia might say.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I just think that there's a different kind of taboo. So in the UFO world, the reason for the invisible college was the taboo was this, you're not supposed to talk about that stuff. It's either super secret or just feels stupid or crazy or conspiratorial. And here, like in this case with China, it's a different taboo, but it's still taboo. That causes the college to be sort of invisible. And it creates, I mean, I guess I'm super one for openness, but is it good to have these sort of
So I
back?
don't think this is about a taboo. I don't think this is invisible in the sense that they're not meeting in the same building together, but they are quite visible if you read the journals.
No, I'm concerned about our going forward, our relationship with China and it becoming this more taboo, like you're not supposed to talk to those guys. We're
I see. Well, look, that is a I I'm no authority on industrial espionage, and that is, the primary allegation is the theft of trade secret.
Right, right.
The spying stuff, the espionage in labs, I think is very secondary, in fact, to that worry, or should be. I mean, there's probably some of that, but you know, it's really hard. Carmen, I spoke to one of your colleagues about this many years ago about how do you get a spy in a lab in China? And they said, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. I mean, that is
Mm,
so hard to do
hmm.
for so many reasons. So I think the problem here is industrial espionage, right? Now, look, they especially with regarding Japan, maybe 20, maybe 30 years ago, we thought they weren't smart enough to do anything original, and the same prejudice has been applied
I
to
know,
China.
exactly. This whole discussion is
that's
just,
that's just
Unbelievably stupid and
yeah,
racist.
yes, it is
it's
very
racist. It's
stupid.
it's
I re
racist and we'll get bitten in the ass.
Yeah,
So yeah, so we need to talk to those people.
of course we do.
uh,
I remember, and again, I've said this before in a Panda, but I'll say it again here. I
hmm,
remember having the conversation with analysts at CIA who followed technology. And I asked them point blank, I said, well, what will happen when it's the Chinese
yeah.
who have actually been the innovators in some technology field? And I swear one of them said, oh, that'll never happen. And I looked at them like, oh, God,
Oh,
save me, help me.
I was at this AI conference with some folks, and this was like last year, and they were saying, the only folks who are really innovating in AI are in the US and Canada. And I was like,
Wow.
really? Like, I don't even spend much time reading about the deep technology behind AI, but I just happen to have read about one algorithm that was crucial for the development of ChatGPT, and it was done by a bunch of Chinese folks like 5 years prior. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, what about this algorithm? And they're like, oh, what? Can you send me that paper? I'm like, come on. If it's like a blinders are on,
No,
and
it's very bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
And you know what? You know how Julia, how I like to say one of my favorite things is to be underestimated.
yes.
And I bet the Chinese feel the same way about this.
Indeed.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
keep underestimating us. We're fine with it.
It's asymmetric warfare
Yeah, it is.
and it's
It
something
is.
that, by the way, it's something that all three of us, anyone who's not been on the sort of top of the totem pole in terms of power, has to learn to do, is to be underestimated and then have your influence.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be known that it's you, but there's actually very few people who are on top of that totem pole
I
or that,
appreciate that. Yeah.
who actually get that. So it seems well, stupid.
Well, I'm keeping track of the time for you, Jonathan, and I think we're under 10 minutes.
Yes. What else
So,
do you want to talk about, Jonathan? What else is on your mind?
Uh,
What are your hopes for the future?
well, those two questions coordinate in the terms of grandchildren. So
nice.
I can't help but, they show up and there they are. So um, apart from that, I will say in a very general way, um, partly coming out of the various traumas related to getting this book out, uh, the future of the way we think about bioethics uh, is on my mind post-pandemic, and there's a little bit of that in the book. But I think a challenge that I may well take on at the suggestion of a publisher is to write a new bioethics textbook that is um, appropriate for the post-pandemic world and a diminished rules-based order.
Mm-hmm.
Aficionados of bioethics, like you two, know that the the standard framing of bioethics principles has started with a principle of respect for autonomy for good reason, because of the scandals and tragedies of experiments, since the Second World War. Um, Personal autonomy, getting into an experiment, very important value. We weren't so well served by thinking about autonomy during the pandemic, and it's still a problem.
Yes.
And most obviously in terms of vaccination. So we don't really have a public health oriented bioethics. There is some really good writing about this, but it hasn't been developed systematically for people who are being introduced to bioethics. So that's on my mind. I know that's very big and vague, but I am thinking in terms of a textbook that would reconsider the role of personal autonomy uh, and principles involved with public health ethics. That is not going to fix our problem with World Health
Right.
Organization or with vaccine nationalism, as I've called it. But it would be a useful framing, I think.
So what exactly do you mean by vaccine nationalism?
Yes, that's an interesting
Well,
phrase.
if you, yeah, so I published a little bit about this during the high pandemic, as I call it, 2020, 2021, 22. Um, what vaccine you got very much depended on where you lived,
Of course.
what country you were in, and that in turn depended very often on what kind of deal your government had made with which company in which country.
Right.
So I'll tell you my favorite story about this. That comes from a friend in Hungary at Central European University. Now they teach in Vienna now, but they still do research and have their research activity in Budapest. Her name is Judith Shandor, and Judith, we would say Judith, is a lawyer who's very well known in law and genetics. And she's told me that when the vaccines were first available in 2021, if you were a pregnant woman in Budapest, you would go to your OBGYN, and your OBGYN would vaccinate you with Moderna. If you were the man who accompanied her, presumably the father, but who knows, he would get Sputnik.
Mm.
Why? Because we're pretty sure that Moderna is going to work,
Yeah. And
and we
Sputnik.
are a pronatalist society.
Yeah.
The dude has done whatever he did. We don't really care as much. I thought that was a great story. I got it from her. You can ask her. Too good to fact check, as the journalists say, right? That story
Yeah.
is too good to fact check.
Right. Wow.
So, vaccine nationalism and vaccine natalism, I guess you'd say.
Wow, that could be taken in that phrase could be taken in very interesting ways because I also feel like we're sort of creating a polarized set of nation states within our own country having to do with
Well, we indeed, and yes, and now it's vaccine localism, which is not a
Mm-hmm.
term that I had thought of before. Julia just gave me that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
We are in vaccine localism for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yes.
Now, I will say, by the way, that the counter argument to my view, which is, oh, we never really faced a pandemic in the history of bioethics before, like the last 80 years.
Right.
Um, the counter argument or the counter example is HIV/AIDS.
Yes.
Yes.
But what's so interesting to me about the HIV/AIDS experience is that we got to these alternative pathways for new pharmaceutical interventions that essentially have made HIV/AIDS a chronic illness, which is incredible, um, through insistence on personal autonomy by ACT UP, which said, we want to be part of any of the clinical trial decision making.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't decide for us that you're not going to try something.
Yes.
Prepared to try this. And that was an expression of or personal autonomy in an organized way. Um, so we
Yes.
so that we really did not in the HIV/AIDS pandemic deal with the bigger justice public health issues.
Well, and I think that one of the key differences is affecting a segment of the population that was very clearly defined, relatively clearly defined, intravenous drug users, gay men, and versus everybody.
This was tricky because, as you know, there were people in the late 80s, early 90s who said, screw them, this is their
Right.
problem.
Yeah, yeah.
They're gay and they use IV drugs. It
Yep.
doesn't affect, and the term that was people were using was the general population, right?
Yes.
So putting aside all the nastiness and of that kind of talk,
Hmm.
um, we can no longer say that about the COVID-19 pandemic. Whatever your biases, right, about gay people or IV drug users, they're irrelevant. This did
Right.
affect the general population.
Right.
So I think there's a need and opportunity to rethink this framing that in effect has made respect for personal autonomy the first among equals among all the other ethics principles we have.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I think it's very American and perhaps one of the only things that really, really differentiates us from some of our adversaries. I'm not necessarily against it, but I think there's a way that we could deal with personal autonomy and personal or community sovereignty, and at the same time, yeah, this is my hopeful statement, move towards some kind of self-transcendence.
We were waiting for it.
Yeah,
We're waiting, we're ready
Well,
for it. We hear you.
we have this also issue
We would be
of,
disappointed if you didn't say something like that. I'm not.
yes,
right, right.
we also have this issue that it's personal autonomy coupled with cognitive silos,
Yes.
where people, it's one thing, number one, it's very hard to even define what is an appropriate level of informational awareness these days. It's like, I don't know. Uh, but there are definitely many, many people who live in a cognitive silo. I see them all the time. I see them more in Texas than I see them here, but I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And that cognitive silo is almost impenetrable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it would be one thing if we had personal autonomy in a world of equal information, equal information absorption, as you said, then you wouldn't need different nation states because we would all know the same thing and it would be obvious what the right set of rules is. But
Yeah.
it ain't obvious. It ain't obvious to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So this is why we should not have indefinite life extension because
Oh, good Lord. One of the many reasons.
one reason of many, because
Yes,
people need to move on.
Yes.
that's right. People do need to move
Really
on.
need to
I
move.
agree.
That's how change happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this seems like a fitting point to
For
end
one more
on.
thing though, Carmen,
Uh-huh.
would you tell my daughter's in-laws, Stephen and Adrian from Los Angeles, welcome to the Spy Museum? Would you do that?
Right now, do I say that in the tape?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Welcome to the Spy Museum.
Thank you.
So you are such a presence there. It's